Hello, 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 and welcome to Philippa Squared Parenting by Design. I'm Philippa Scott, and I'm joined yet again by my beautiful co-host Pippa Cox. Hello, Pippa.
Hello, Philippa. How are you today?
I'm fabulous. A little cold. It's actually freezing today, and anybody who's down south of Sunshine Coast probably thinks I'm, full of it, but it feels really
But
cold.
West Queensland is it's freezing. Like it's single digit cold. I
Well, at
mean,
night
single
it's single
digits
digits.
at at night. Yeah, during the day, I think the first number is in the still in is still what in the twos,
Yeah,
20
most days.
something. Yeah, yeah.
Yes.
But for us Queenslander, it's really, really cold. So anyway, we are taking very good care of ourselves, aren't we, Philippa?
We are, and that's what we want to talk to you about today.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Very good care of ourselves because we don't want to get sick in wintertime.
No, we don't. And so big part of that is keeping warm. That's all that's a lot of Chinese medicine stuff. Some of my acupuncture collaborationists, so Women in the Way, they've been posting a lot recently on keeping warm, having enclosed shoes on and making sure that, you're wearing appropriate clothing to be warm because in Chinese medicine it's all about being warm, right?
Yeah, they're big
And
on warmth. And
yeah, totally.
particularly in Chinese medicine, after you've had your baby, just as a segue, it's all warm liquids to
Yeah.
keep that energy in, to ground ourselves again, to keep it in, to
Yeah, absolutely.
give
So
it
we're
away.
talking today, folks, about self-care as parents and what does that really, really look like? So, we hear the term self-care a lot, don't we, Pippa? And often that means a woman going to get a pedicure or a manicure or, having a day at the hairdressers and things like that. And we think of self-care in that way. And look, those are fun things to do, but they really aren't self-care, are they?
Well, it's there's so many things about self-care. It's not just the physical, because by doing the hair or the manicure or the pedicure, we're taking care of the physical, but we're much more than physical beings, aren't we?
We are. We definitely
We're
are.
are we're emotional beings, we're mental beings, we're spiritual beings. In fact, some people say that we're spiritual entities in a bodily form.
Yeah, absolutely. One of my clients this week has gone down to visit in Northern Rivers the gentleman who wrote the book, The Postnatal Depletion Cure. And I'm sure you've read that book. It's a fascinating book on all things postpartum in terms of, mum's body returning to normal, nutrition, warmth, all of those sorts of things. But it's more than just the nutrition side. It's about how do we mentally and emotionally bounce back in that space too. And he talks about postnatal depletion lasting for potentially decades. Once you're postpartum, you're always postpartum. There are some things that never go back. I was listening to a podcast of another client of mine recently who was talking to an exercise scientist, and he was talking about how postnatal mums should never, ever, ever again do crunches. It is no longer an exercise for a woman post birth, even 20 years post birth. They shouldn't be doing that exercise. And I think there's a real lack of understanding out there in the general public about how much a woman's body changes post birth and what real self care looks like. So, as our listeners probably know, Pippa and I both work with women in that stage of pregnancy and birth and early parenting. And so we're always fascinated by making sure that we're up to date with the latest in ideas around self-care and making sure that families are caring for themselves in all aspects of their life. And you know what? Sometimes that means dad's got to go and have a bike ride or go sailing or do something that makes him feel good and gives him a sense of himself. And for mums, sometimes that means having a night out with the girls, or it might mean going and having a shopping trip or going to the beach as a family. There are all sorts of ways that self care can be entered into. What I would love to hear, Pippa, is your top 3 self-care ideas for mums and dads.
Right. It differs from person to person, doesn't it? But
It does.
it's really about feeling your own emotional and mental bucket. So if that means reading a good book, it means reading a good book. But how can you read a good book if you're in a house with a bunch of kids? How do you do that? It's kind of impossible, isn't it? So it just depends on what really floats your boat, what feeds your soul, right? It could be a walk, it could be a swim, it could be a walk through nature, it could be going out and having coffee with the girls. If you're a social butterfly, it could be just give me 2 hours in the bedroom, please, and lock the door so I can watch my favorite movie, anything that you want. But why is it so important to care for ourselves? That is the big question, isn't it? Because as mothers, we are socialized into giving, giving, giving to everybody else. We give, we give, we give. That's what we do as women. That's what we do as mothers. That's what we've been socialized to do. And what we're realizing now is that it's to our detriment, isn't it, Philippa?
Yeah.
Because we end up really tired, we end up stressed, we end up burnt out, we end up becoming cranky mums, cranky wives. We have shortcuts to meals because we're just too stressed and too tired to do anything about it. So I remember the last podcast we had, we were talking about meals and nutrition and the ritual behind an actual meal, like sitting down as a family or that type of stuff.
And that's coming
And
out
that
next week.
can even see, yes. And that can even be seen as self-care.
Yes.
And
Yes.
the thing is, in our lifestyle at the moment, this is one thing that I'm absolutely loving, Philippa, is that self-care is not becoming a dirty, selfish word anymore. People are starting to realize that self-care isn't selfish.
No.
It's selfless.
Yes.
Because how can you be your best self, give your best to your family when you are feeling like proverbial SHIT?
I think we've already broken the swearing rule on this podcast, so it's fine. So
Clever.
yeah, it is. It's important. And I guess the thing that and I've expressed this on the show before, that, there are times, we are socially conditioned to look after our children first, but there's also an innate part of us that is about protecting our young, and that's primal, and it's going to kick in. What we're looking for is to really set up spaces and expectations in your family and in your community that allow you to help and support yourself. And nobody else is going to set this up for you. So making sure that you're doing it together. If you don't have a partner who can do this, so I have one friend who works all week and her husband works all weekend. And so she doesn't have the capacity to have him step in and support her to be able to do something kind for herself outside of her working hours. But for her, reaching out and creating community of other mums is where the answer comes in, and utilizing her parents to make sure that she has some space to do some self-care. And you know what? Sometimes self-care is actually about doing the emotional work to empty your full bubble so that you are
No,
yeah.
love that.
Yeah. So because
can we gold plate that and encapsulate that, please?
Well, it's true though. The emotional work of having of letting go of our past, of letting go of the way we were parented, of resolving the traumas that we've had in our life, mean that we can then step into mothering, being aware of what's going on, being able to respond instead of react. The advantages of having an empty bubble or empty balloon in which to have life come into means that we are not overwhelmed before we even start. And so doing that emotional work is ideal preconception, but if you can do it in pregnancy or early postpartum, look, honestly, there's no late time. I did mine when my eldest was 16 and my youngest was 10. You have to get there eventually. If you don't, it will catch up with you. At some point, it will catch up with you. And that was my story. I pushed through and pushed through and pushed through for years, nearly 2 decades. And I was all about serving others. And I still am. I love that aspect of my work, and I love that that's a big part of who I am. But I didn't do, and I thought I was doing the work. I was doing lots of self-development stuff, but I didn't actually do the real work of facing those things and resolving the trauma. And so it's really important that we do that kind of work, because it actually allows us to be not empty, but have room for the things that are happening. The overwhelm of mothering, the overwhelm of parenting becomes so much easier to do, and it
Yeah,
doesn't become
it's
overwhelming.
exactly. It's about building resilience.
Yeah.
That's how I see it.
Yeah.
And we've all got that natural resilience inside of us. It's innate within us.
Mm.
And through my work when I was overseas, that's when I realized how resilient and how strong women actually are. And now that we're living in this world where and I've mentioned this before in the podcast, and it's something I'm really passionate about, is that we are living in the best time, comfort-wise, in human history.
Mm.
We've mentioned it before. We've got everything at our fingertips. Every single thing that we want to survive, and then some at our fingertips.
Mm.
And if we just take a moment just to think about that, to think about we've got stuff that our grandmothers didn't even dream of,
Yeah.
And yet we are so busy and so stressed, and more stressed than we ever were before.
Yes.
And this
Yeah.
is where the self-care really comes into its own.
Yeah. And self-care, even just doing a 10-minute mindfulness a day can make a difference. But when you're knee deep in a mountain of children, it can be really hard to even find 10 minutes. I get that. I totally, totally get that. But it's important to find a way and make some things not negotiable where you can. And even if that means if you are lucky enough to get a shower that day, that you take the extra 2 minutes if possible to, and this is one of my favorites, and I actually teach my kids to do this too, after a big day at school. But when you're standing in the shower, close your eyes and just imagine that water is running right through you, washing away all the debris from the day, taking with it anything that doesn't suit you anymore, that doesn't work for you, that's no longer needed, just letting it all go and just watching it roll its way around the plug and out down the drain. And that doesn't take very long to do, Pippa, but it releases that stuff. And you can think about all those things that you're letting go for the day and give that moment to yourself. And it could only be 30 seconds that you take to do that. But you know what? That's for you. That's just
Mm-hmm.
for you. And it's a really great, because see, men do this automatically, right? They shed different parts of themselves. They have these rooms that they operate in, and when they come out of one room, they shed off that room, and then they come into the hallway where nothing happens, and then I go into a different room. And that transition that they make from room to room in their brain, you know, from work mode to home mode and so on, they just they're actually far better at it than we are, because they live in rooms, whereas we're in this open plan environment, right, where we can see everything all at once. And that can be
Yeah.
a real detriment to us. And so if we take the
Yeah.
time to even do something as simple as letting it go in the shower, or just doing some breath work, you know, you can really easily jump online and find some breath work YouTubes, and find something that promotes relaxation or grounding or um, letting go. And just do something for 2 to 5 minutes that calms you. If you can do 10 or 20, amazing.
Yeah.
But
But the
yeah,
shower is generally one of these places where, if we're really lucky, we can be by ourselves.
if we're really lucky.
Yeah.
And that isn't always possible. It's not.
No.
It's not. I think about my daughter, and most nights she's got, I'm not in the shower with her, but she's in the shower with the baby, and I'm ready to take the baby out of the shower so that I can wash her. So she gets that last 2 minutes by herself while I get her dry and dressed and so on. You know, and if you're a mum with a partner and that's what, then make that happen. Find a way to have even 2 minutes at the beginning or 2 minutes at the end of your shower to just do that. Um,
So,
and
and the thing is, Philippa, exactly what you're talking about is that to have those moments of self-care, we're not talking huge amounts of time. You can have a reset in a minute.
yeah,
In a
yeah,
minute.
yeah,
You know, if you just take the time to center yourself and breathing,
yeah,
that breathe, breathing is life. And the fact that if we have an exhale that's longer than our inhale,
mm.
what does that activate, Philippa?
That activates our parasympathetic nervous system.
It does. And what does our parasympathetic nervous system do?
That's our rest and digest system.
So would that calm me down?
Yes.
Oh, I love it. I love it. And so, and this is a simple technique that I used to use when I used to be really, really busy at work.
Mm,
Because as you can imagine, you're working and you've got 100 things going on at once, and everything needs to be done now, and you've got to reprioritize yourself 100 million times a day.
yeah.
And all it would take is a minute for me
Mm.
to just go into the toilet. I used to go into the toilet because it was the only place I could be by myself at that stage. and and just sit down on the toilet and just breathe in, 2, 3, 4, out, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. I'd do that for a minute and I'd
Mm,
come out of the bathroom like a different woman.
yeah.
And it's 1 minute
Yep.
of grounding can put a whole different slant on your day and can really fill up that self-care bucket, that
Absolutely.
emotional bucket.
Yeah. And you know what, this actually comes down to awareness, right? And it comes down to prioritizing ourselves. So when we see ourselves as worthy of that 1 minute, when we see that that 1 minute is important for our self-care, that's when we will create the 1 minute to do that work. If we don't see ourselves as worthy, deserving, um, and it doesn't fit with our sense of who we are, then we won't create the awareness of the time, because there is time in everyone's life where they can do that. Even if you are sitting with a baby who's breastfeeding, do it then. Do you know why it's so good to do then? We get that law of entrainment enacted again, right? If your parasympathetic nervous system is activated, so will be your baby's. And so you can then create a feedback loop where everybody's got their energy into a calmed drop space. And I used to breathe how I wanted my children to breathe. If I wanted my children, because that's that breathing in for 4 and out for 6, that's how we breathe when we're asleep. So we can actually trick our body into being sleepy by breathing in that kind of mode. So if I wanted children to go to sleep, if I breathed in that pattern, children often follow your breathing. So I would breathe in that pattern of wanting to go to sleep, and my baby would go to sleep with me. Now, my husband just used to fall asleep with them. And no, so that worked most of the time. Although one time I did come home we used to have yummy mummy nights once a month. And I came home one night and it was about 10 o'clock at night. And there's my 1-year-old, the third child, wandering around the house while everybody else was in bed. And she'd just gotten down. She'd just gotten down off the bed. Trevor was still, he was fast asleep. And there's Serena wandering around, just doing her own thing. And so it's not always wise to fall asleep before them, but when you're actually doing it, you can be doing it for you and them at the same time, and that's powerful. But recognizing your thoughts and beliefs around whether or not you deserve self-care can often tell you why you're not prioritizing it.
And a lot of people aren't even aware that they're not aware.
Yeah.
That's what I found through my coaching.
Mm.
And it's like 95, I would even go as far as to say that most people, 95% of people, and that has actually been statistically been researched. 95% of the population do not realize that they're not aware.
Yeah.
95%, Philippa, we are just running around thinking about our day and thinking about the things that we're doing and the things that we need to do, rather than who we are and who we're being.
Isn't that interesting? The old term running around like a headless chook. If you've ever, like I grew up, my grandparents were farmers, and I actually have this one memory of my dad chopping the head off a chicken and me jumping up onto the swing and the chook running around the backyard with no head on it, right? And it's true. They run around and they just run aimlessly, and they're busy, but they're not going anywhere, or they don't know where they're going. They're just going through the motions. It's a muscle memory type scenario, and all the nerve ending, whatever, it doesn't even matter why they do that thing. But that's how most of us are going through life. There's no direction, there's no real understanding of who we are and who we want to be and how we want to show up in our world. I was speaking to a client earlier today, and she's gone through my therapy process, and she's now just doing some coaching work with me, and she's stepping into these new spaces in her life. And I said to her, the difference between you now and you 5 weeks ago is that now when something occurs for you, you respond instead of purely reacting.
Mm-hmm.
But you're also in a space now where you need to teach people how to interact with you now, because you're in a different space. You're actually going to demand different things for yourself, and you're going to have a different outlook on what you deserve. And so for this woman to have gone from a place of reacting to the things around her to responding in a chosen way, that's life-changing, because now she can show up in her life the way she wants to, as opposed to the way she just does,
Yeah, by default.
Yeah, which is so cool.
By default. Yeah, it's fantastic, isn't it? And that's the one thing about coaching that coaching does, that really increases your self-awareness and um, communication processes and self-esteem, your physiology, what you're thinking, all that self-talk that we have within ourselves. And you find that the more coaching you have, the less negative self-talk you actually have to deal with as well.
Yeah.
Which is kind of interesting, isn't it? It's really, really cool. So anyway, let's just wrap this up because we have been talking a little bit. We have been talking a little bit, haven't we, Philippa?
We never
So,
ramble.
no. So self-care, so important.
Mm.
So important. It's like when you go into any aircraft, the first thing that they say is your oxygen mask on first before your children. There is a reason why they say that. There is a reason. How can you look after other people if you don't look after yourselves?
Yep. So one, it's important. Two, it it requires you to actually think about doing it and making it happen.
Yeah. And a really great way for you to think about it is to put an alarm on your phone. So what time of day suits you, you just put that reminder on your phone so you know to find somewhere, and you can just breathe for a minute. You can go for a walk, you can go for a swim, you can read a book, you can do whatever you like that really fills your soul up.
And if that
And
doesn't
mobile
work,
phones are great.
yeah. If that doesn't work for you though, because your world is too chaotic, like for me, setting an alarm at a particular time each day just wouldn't wouldn't work for me because my days look so different all the time. But if you put a sign on your fridge that says, "What have you done for yourself today?" or something that's on your mirror in your bathroom, "What have you done for yourself today?" It'll remind you to do that. We need visual cues until it becomes a habit.
Yeah. And change it around, because when you put something like that on your mirror or on your fridge, you get so used to it that you don't look at it anymore. So you need to change it up.
Yes, that's true. That is true. Very true. So, folks, I hope that you've got something out of this, even if it's just to be more aware of your thoughts around self care and how you think about that in your world so that you can maybe challenge some of those beliefs you have about self care, enabling you to reach out into the world and create moments of self care for yourself.
Yes. Here's to self-care, Philippa. I think I am going to go for a beautiful walk up a mountain this afternoon.
Oh, how
That's my
beautiful.
self-care,
I love
getting back into nature.
it. I love that. That's perfect. For
What?
me, it's going out into the backyard with my chooks and my garden and my cows and all the other things, and just being on the property and watching the sunset. Um, yeah, and having
Nice.
my family around. Yeah, yeah. So,
Nice.
well, I hope you find your self care the thing that fills your cup. And we would love to hear from you. If you haven't found our Facebook page, Philippa Squared Parenting by Design, please go there, interact with us. Tell us what you'd like to hear about. Tell us what self care you're doing. Yeah, we're really interested to hear from you. Uh, Subscribe to the podcast, and yeah, jump onto we also have an Instagram page, same name. Jump on and tell us what you'd like to hear about and how this is impacting your world. So we'll see you again next week. Thank you again, Pippa, and signing off from us.
Beautiful. Thanks, Philippa. Bye.
Bye.